Episode 6 of Season 2 of Silo is here, and with it being called Barricades, this episode was certainly set around the ones which were there, which were designed to prevent the people of Mechanical from gaining ground, and as well, make them suffer. With Bernard feeling as though he had the upper hand at the start, but by the end of it, it's seeming like he was not only questioning if he'd made the correct approach, but also him realizing that he'd lost support from the people he could trust most. There was a victory in Silo 18, and it was for that of the rebellion. So with that, let's jump into the video and break down all that there was to take away from the most recent episode. Here is Silo Season 2 Episode 6, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Mechanical's gain. During this episode, we saw traditional style warfare taking place in the sense that it bore a resemblance to land being taken being seen as a victory and progress, and that very land that was lost being seen as a defeat. We saw Mechanical struggling in the sense that their food was being laced with rat poison by somebody on the inside that was working with Bernard and the Raiders, meaning that the people on the upper level were trying to kill off some people on the lower levels and also get them to starve. Bernard's intentions were to starve the population, and then, with that, the population would turn on the very people that are forcing the food to be withheld, and it would cause them to turn in Knox and Shirley for the murder of Judge Meadows, even though they obviously didn't do it. This didn't work out for Bernard though, because people from a few levels higher, 122, were dropping down food for them, which meant that it tamed the mindset of the people when it came to turning against Knox and Shirley. Martha said the line, "We're Mechanical, we don't fight over food, we share it." So it showed that Bernard was trying to get the people to go against their very beliefs and behaviours that they've got embedded within them, almost looking to turn them all against one another. Shirley and Knox had a plan in this episode to go up against the Raiders, and we saw that very plan being carried out. Knox told Mark a couple of episodes back to not make weapons for anybody and to hold them back. That meant that there was an abundance of weapons for himself and the people of Mechanical to show the strength that they had when they went up against the Raiders. As well as that, Shirley was with a team of people that were using a saw to cut through the levels of the silo and climb their way up so that the Raiders would get caught in a pocket and they'd be outnumbered. Knox said a line that was just delivered in such a cold way to Mr. Amundsen. He said, "You will kill 10 of us, but we will kill all of you and take the stairs." That line was all that was needed to make the Raiders back off, because they knew that they were outnumbered in that situation and they would have all been killed. With the victory, it meant that Mechanical gained 10 whole floors compared to where the blockade was before, and it meant that they now had a farm that was on one of the floors, so it meant that Bernard wasn't going to be able to starve them and use that as a way of manipulating the people. So Mechanical and the lower levels were now united and had some kind of upper hand. I thought it was interesting that this episode kind of mirrored what we saw in episode 1 of season 2 with the rebellion in Silo 17. The positioning of the rebellion and the Raiders on the bridge was similar. The fact that Paul Billings turned and showed that he was now against the mayor, and also the mindset of the people in Mechanical was very much the same. It was so similar, but the real difference here is Silo 17 didn't have a Jules that was out there and had the capability of getting back and changing things. It was a victory for Mechanical and the lower levels today, but with Bernard losing a lot over the course of this runtime, he might come down with full force, and rather than just cut off the food supply, he may use brute force the next time round. We also saw that Shirley and Knox had a bit of a kiss before it was interrupted by Billings. I didn't expect a romance to blossom between them, but now that it has, it kinda makes me question if one of them is gonna die before the end of the season. A romance adds in an extra layer, and the both of them are at the forefront of the rebellion, so now I just don't quite know if I can see the both of them surviving. Bernard's loss. With Mechanical's gain came Bernard's loss, and we saw him losing his head on multiple occasions in this episode. I genuinely feel like we saw a side to him that we hadn't seen before, and it was one that was filled with panic, fear, and he was stressed out to the max. What was interesting about that though was that he thought he'd planned everything to a T, read about how it would unfold, and Silo 18 was following that pathway, especially with Mechanical receiving food from a level that was higher up. It was all part of the plan. He even said how that happening put them ahead of schedule and accelerated the timeline. But what he didn't account for was the drilling through the ceiling and them gaining 10 floors in a matter of minutes. It's a journey to the top for Mechanical, and them gaining any more levels is something that he wants to prevent from happening. One person that he lost in this episode, especially at the end, was Sheriff Billings. Billings began to doubt the pact, the silo, and everything that he's pretty much devoted his life to. As he said at the end, he wasn't on any side, he was just on the side of the law and doing what he felt was right. This was why he wasn't prepared to tell Bernard the location of where Knox and Shirley were. Instead, he was withholding it so he could look into the death of Judge Meadows in a proper way, rather than just taking Bernard and Robert Sims's word for it. With Billings being told about the video of the outside world that resembled the page that he had of the outside, and with him also hearing about the corrupt nature of Robert Sims, he's now on his own, and he doesn't know who he can trust. As well, he hadn't been taking his herbs for the syndrome that he had, and his hands had stopped shaking. So that was something else that made him question the legitimacy of the disease and if it was something that was real or something that the silo was selecting people to have. We've seen them lie about medical conditions and procedures before, so I wouldn't put it past the silo. In terms of other people that Bernard lost, it very much seems like he's on the cusp of losing Robert Sims, his once loyal companion. Sims was sitting around twiddling his thumbs and clicking his pen because he was experiencing what it was like to live the life of being the judge, the person that just fills an empty cloak and appears to hold the power to the people, when in reality they do nothing. There was so much going on all of the different levels, something that Sims was used to dealing with, but as we saw, he was helpless and wasn't even aware of what was going on. It was only through Diego where he found out about the people cutting through the levels, which then spared his wife to report it to Amundsen. I feel this was because she almost needed a win in her book after Bernard appeared to threaten her about being involved in the harboring of Knox and Shirley in the previous episode, something that Sims didn't know about. Bernard is losing support on all sides, and I think he's definitely feeling it. He's losing it that much that he ended up going to Judge Meadows' body and confiding in her because he has nobody to confide in following her death. He mentioned how he only killed her because out of all of the scenarios that he ran, that was the most efficient and optimum one, which would lead to the rebellion being squashed. However, it doesn't really seem like that's the case at the moment, hence why he burst into tears. He said how there'd been 140 years of stability and how it could end under his watch. This was something which really exposed the character and showed the fear that was present within him, because he didn't want to be the person that caused that stability to crumble. There was one saving grace for Bernard in this episode though, and that came with him making Lucas Carl his shadow. Carl spent the entirety of the episode trying to decipher the code that was embedded within Salvator Quinn's love letter. He used something called Caesar's cipher, which is when a letter of the alphabet gets switched with a different letter of the alphabet a number of positions away. This was something that yielded little. All Lucas Carl got was the name Ali. Ali was the daughter of Salvator Quinn, but the fact that that was the only thing that he got, it meant that the code was deeper than Caesar's cipher, and it needed to be worked on even more. I was originally thinking this letter was written to a lover, but what if it was instead written to his daughter? This is the weakest position we've seen Bernard in during the entirety of the show, so it's going to be interesting to see how he gets out of the dilemma that he's found himself in. Jules' situation. The final thing that we saw in this episode was Jules waking up after passing out when she found the helmet that she was looking for. There was nothing more mentioned about Solo's true identity and the fact that he'd lied about who he was, but we did see that Solo had brought Jules back to health and healed her infection that she had in her arm with some homemade antibiotics. Solo hid the suit and the helmet because he wanted Jules to go and fix the pump that he mentioned in the previous episode so it would stop the water from rising up the levels. Solo has around 13 months until IT is immersed underwater, and he's now blackmailing Jules so that he can ensure his survival. I imagine Jules is going to do so, because if the show is going to follow suit with the novel, then he does have a large role to play in making sure that she can communicate with Silo 18. So I think she will go ahead with it, because realistically, what other option has she got? My review of the episode. I thought this was an okay episode of the show. I said this last week and I'll say it again this week, but this season is definitely a lot slower than what the previous season was. I don't know whether that's because now that Season 3 and Season 4 have been confirmed, they've slowed down the pace. And don't get me wrong, it's not dragging, it just feels like it's really slow. I also don't like the aspect ratio as much as the first season. It was wider, it filled the screen, and it felt a lot brighter. Whereas this time round, it doesn't really feel like that at all. It just feels a lot darker and less glossy. That's my negative critique out of the way though. I'm really enjoying watching Bernard's struggles and him losing grasp on the control that he thought that he had. He's weakening day by day, and every plan that he puts in place, it's causing him to fail. So watching him scramble to form new allies in the hope of securing victory is exciting to watch. I was surprised that we only got a couple of minutes with Jules and Solo in this episode, and I would have liked more, but I also kinda like the fact that because she passed out, the events that we saw happening in Silo 18 was whilst she was in a passed out state, so it was a clever way of watching the episode unfold. With the show being confirmed for 2 more seasons, it does definitely make me wonder how this season is gonna end up wrapping up. I'm starting to question if we'll even see Jules making it back to Silo 18 in this season of the show. There's only 4 episodes left, and I don't want it to feel rushed, so I don't think she's going to be able to just make it back, but I feel there might be some kind of way of them finding out that she is still alive. Billings is actually shaping up to be one of my favourite characters. I feel like he's very human and is almost like what the average person in there would be like. He wants to follow the very rules that he's been following for the entirety of his life, but at the same time, he's now starting to question the system that he's been taught to follow. I can definitely see him becoming a problem for Bernard and joining the side of the rebellion. The scene where we saw Knox and Shirley storming the raiders in this episode felt like a brief glimpse into what's on the horizon, and I hope that we do see some battles taking place in the coming episodes before the season draws to a close. So, there you have it, Silo Season 2 Episode 6, Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on Silo, then click on the card in the top corner. I'm breaking down every episode in Season 2. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.